We lost Antonio Inoki not too long ago, an absolute pioneer of wrestling around the world. It doesn't really do him justice. There's not
really anything you can say. Like he's in a league of his own. He's done almost everything. Really tried to popularize as best he could the mixture of martial arts and wrestling. Probably one of the godfathers of MMA in that respect. Founder of New Japan Pro Wrestling, unrecognized WWF champion. List goes on and on and on and on.
All of
politician.
Lest we forget, we're going to get into all of that. Because we're going to get into some of the craziest Antonio Inoki stories that you may or may not have heard.
Yeah, so the whole thing with Inoki is he's sort of been everywhere, done everything, and there's just a lot of very humorous tales of his adventures through the years.
The best way I saw it described on Twitter was Antonio Inoki was like Chuck Norris, but all the facts are real.
Yeah.
And as you're going to find out over the course of this video, it's very much the case. You're going to hear some stories that you may know already. You may hear some stories that you didn't even know were a thing, but they are all very true. Let's paint the picture first of all. Who was Antonio Inoki, Sam Driver?
So, Kanji Inoki was born into an affluent family in Yokohama on February 20th, 1943. He was the sixth son of 7 boys, along with 3 daughters, and his dad, who was a businessman and a politician, sadly passed away when he was just 5 years old. 6th grade, he was taught karate by one of his older brothers, but by the time he moved to 7th grade, he was 5'11", and then joined the school basketball team because of his height. He then moved into track and field, winning his first championship of many at a Yokohama junior high school track and field competition. And then following the desolation of Japan in World War II, his family fell on hard times, like many Japanese families in their position. They then decided to move to Brazil in order to work in the booming coffee industry. His grandfather, mother, and brothers all went. His grandfather sadly passed away during the journey. Inoki would then continue to win regional track and field championships in Brazil for shot put, discus, and javelin, as well as the all-Brazilian championships in shot put and discus. So, started off as an athlete, really, track and field, shot put, javelin, all that kind of stuff. And then he ends up in the world of wrestling. So how does he end up there? Well, at the age of 17 in Brazil, he met somebody called Reiki Dozan. Now, Reiki Dozan's his own fascinating, tragic wrestling figure, but he's indisputably the father of pro wrestling in Japan. He was a Korean immigrant, and Reiki Dozan was a sumo wrestler who would transition out of that sport into what would become pro wrestling in Japan. Now, in sumo, he was the rank of sekiwake, which is 1 or 2 ranks from the top of the Makuchi division, which is the top division in the country. The ranks from bottom to top in the division are Megashira, Komusubi, Sekiwake, Ozeki, and Yokozuna, although Yokozuna is technically still Ozeki. The thing is here, though, there were several factors in sumo, even to this day, that can sort of limit a performer's ceiling. And one of those things was kind of seen as him being a little bit too successful for his humble origins. There were elements of anti-Korean racism that maybe stifled some of his attempts to move further up in the sumo world. And then there was also a bit of a falling out he had, I believe, over a financial matter with someone in his stable, which led to him leaving the sport. He then went on to join the black market, selling the possessions of American soldiers that were moving to Korea. He went through several other odd jobs that led to him becoming associated with some members of the underground, the criminal underground in Japan. And then this would lead to him using his ex-sumo status to join a charity tour that was going to be happening in Japan. Now, the Shriners, the Shriners with the little cars, raise a lot of money for kids?
I've seen them, yes.
So the Shriners in Japan wanted to do a bit of a charity wrestling tour, and they were going to book Americans to come over, and of course they would need some national talent maybe. And so there was a handful of Japanese talent that were picked to kind of be part of the tour. Reiki Dozan was one of these people. He got a month of training, and then he would push forward into superstardom, the likes that I don't even think Hulk Hogan reached. It's quite something, but he defeat American after American, and of course in that time he became a national hero for standing up to them on behalf of the nation, and he even had some moderate success as a heel in the USA. Now, upon meeting Inoki, Riki Dozan was like, oh, pretty good track and field athlete, you should come back to Japan with me and train. So he became sort of a disciple of Riki Dozan, went with him everywhere he went, got trained by him, and then in 1962 he'd received the ring name Antonio in order to exoticize his origin and perhaps endear him to his adopted Brazilian home. However, on his excursion to the US, he was also given the names Tokyo Tom and Little Tokyo, the latter which is quite ironic considering the man was a literal skyscraper. But from there, he was part of Riki Dozan's company, which was JWA. He became part of a successful tag team with Giant Baba called the BI Cannon. Riki Dozan then dies in a rather horrible manner in which he is stabbed by someone over a minor disagreement outside a nightclub. I believe the man stepped on his shoes. This leads to blows. The guy pulls a knife. Riki Dozan attempts to apologize. And then from there, it kind of gets to a point where he doesn't accept the apology. Riki Dozan ends up mounting him on the floor, just punching him. The guy stabs him. Riki Dozan goes to hospital. Doctor's like, it's not life-threatening, but you need surgery. Undergoes surgery. Comes out of the surgery and he's told not to drink. Keeps on drinking because he had a little bit of a problem. And then after he died, which came basically as a result of the drinking that led to a secondary surgery, and then that led to him developing an illness which cost him his life, there was a bit of a coup attempt with Enoki trying to lead some of the talent to take over the JWA. Now, this was ratted out on, and Enoki was forced to leave, and he would form, Baba would stay, but Enoki would go, and Enoki would form New Japan Pro Wrestling, and then Baba would leave and form All Japan Pro Wrestling, and then JWA would die a death. But we're going to get into some really ridiculous things Enoki did, and maybe his mentor might have had a bit of bearing on it.
Just a bit.
So Riki Dozan had a thing called Reiki Mansion, which was a luxurious apartment in Akasaka, Tokyo, with a giant R on all sides of the building.
It's a Mr. Burns type thing to have, isn't it? I love it.
He had something called the Reiki Sports Palace in Shibuya, Tokyo, which included a bowling alley, a pool room, a bar called Club Reiki, and a restaurant called Reiki Restaurant.
We should do a video on Riki Dozan.
We should. Before he died, he bought land that he was going to turn into a giant lakeside country club, which was going to feature a shooting range, an indoor ice rink, and a hotel. Like, he was literally that rich. He was that powerful and that much of a celebrity. He would apparently sometimes leave matches in full gear, go to one of his bars, sit down, and then remark to the staff that it was a bit of a rough day at work while he's just bleeding all over the floor. And people are just kind of looking at him like, what? He'd insist his wife would carry a firearm wherever she went. He regularly played shogi, which is Japanese chess, basically, against a professional grade player.
With his wife with a firearm behind him.
Probably. If he felt good on a certain day when he was drinking, he might leave up to 10,000 yen as a tip, which adjusted for inflation is about 350 quid. Not bad. But if he didn't feel good, which was most days, he would often just start bar fights with anybody that he could. And he would almost expose the business regularly because he would be seen battering somebody, and then fans would be going out for a drink after the matches, and there he is with his opponent sharing a nice drink. So it led to a lot of questions from the press. But basically, yeah, that's kind of the origin of where Antonio Inoki started.
This is your mentor.
Where he came from. This is his mentor. This is the person that saw something in him that would lead to, I mean, Christ, Riki Dozan had basically single-handedly built the Japanese professional wrestling industry, with the help of a lot of people, but as the main attraction, he was kind of the Hogan figure. And he just, he knew he needed to build more talent. Somebody like Inoki with that background works really well.
Absolutely. Now, Enoki, as you say, would go on to be part of New Japan Pro Wrestling, to form New Japan Pro Wrestling and form the International Wrestling Grand Prix. As
well as the Enoki Genome Foundation and a lot of other things that are nice when I'm saying this, but maybe a little bit crap. They didn't quite work out how they were supposed to.
But then, you know what, it's one for trying, and he tried a lot of things.
Yeah.
The first stories that I want to bring up about Enoki, it's one that people probably have heard about, probably don't know everything about, and it's Enoki and Muhammad Ali. I think we have to start with, we start soft.
We're kind of doing an iceberg.
Yeah, we are doing an iceberg of Antonio Inoki. The whole thing coming about because Muhammad Ali, in his pomp, in his heyday, all the catchphrases and all the fight skills, wanted to challenge an Oriental fighter to a contest.
Which is not a term that should be used anymore.
Absolutely not, but that was the terminology.
That was used in the quote.
That was the terminology that was used in the quote. And he said he wanted to challenge said fighter and offered $1 million to do so. And he said he could beat anybody in a mixed martial arts challenge. He's the best boxer in the world. I can wrestle. I can do whatever.
To be fair, if I was Muhammad Ali, I'd probably think the same. I mean, you're Muhammad Ali. It's like being The Rock, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Antonio Inoki said, look, I'm not going to choose somebody for, but I tell you what, how about you fight me? How about we make it 6 million and then I'm in? So it ended up with Ali and Inoki making a lot of money to participate in what was supposed to be an exhibition. We saw the build up to this, and there was all the smack talk that you would expect. Muhammad Ali referring to Inoki on many occasions in these presses as a pelican, because obviously that pronounced chin.
Not just pronounced chin. Can we just also say, I mean, just the greatest chin
the strongest
in world history.
Chin.
Not even like you could cut glass with it. Could you imagine getting like chin buttered by it? It'd knock you out.
I feel scared, and that's just a picture behind us if you're watching on the YouTube channel. Ali had been watching Inoki training for this fight and seen him absolutely punishing sparring partners with his wrestling nous. And Ali was like, oh, actually, I'm not sure about this.
He's going to have my life.
Inoki declared that this shouldn't be a worked wrestling match.
And it shouldn't have been.
No, absolutely
it shouldn't have been,
not.
But Ali wanted it.
Yeah, it should be a real fight. And at which point, Ali's side, his team said, all right, we need to change some of these rules a little bit. There were very specific rules that both men say, in hindsight, limited their expertise. The match that we got, 14,000 people rocked up for the Budokan, and it was, whilst it is a piece of wrestling history,
it's a very important piece of wrestling history. It opened doors to a lot of conversations that would, again, as I said earlier, Antonio Inoki, one of the driving factors, I believe, in the foundation of MMA as, an actual sort of regulated sport, like a thing that exists in an official capacity, I guess.
But the fight itself featured Ali keeping his distance from Inoki, trying to do takedowns.
Yeah.
And as to the rules that stipulated, that was something that Ali was able to do. And Inoki eventually realizing that I'm not going to be able to get close to this guy to do a takedown. I've got a strategy. I'm going to lie on the ground.
Like an overturned turtle.
Like an overturned turtle. And I'm just going to kick him.
Which, to be fair, one of the shots he gets in on one of the knees is just... Ali
admitted in an interview afterwards, my legs are hurting after that one. And this was the match.
Yeah.
And it's funny to read about it and see bits of it in hindsight, because it is remembered as something that's so iconic. But when the fight ended and it was announced that it was a draw, there was garbage pelted into the ring. People were upset.
You'd seen Antonio Inoki tear through people, tear them apart with his prowess of legitimate striking, grappling. The guy is a martial arts machine. You want to watch him do what he does best, but all of a sudden he's forced to kind of just lie on his back because of some stupid rules. When we could have had something as exciting as Ali going in for a punch, maybe landing a few, and then Inoki just kind of going and just tearing his arm off, which of course you couldn't have. So it was just a foolish thing that shouldn't have really ever happened. But the spectacle of it alone, it's so tantalizing that it couldn't not be a big deal.
It got the wrestling world talking about New Japan Pro Wrestling as well as a result, and as still a sort of fledgling company at that point.
I believe the promoter behind Ali Inoki was Vince McMahon.
He was involved.
Yeah.
And because why wouldn't it's got Vince McMahon's fingerprints all over it. And it wouldn't be the end of Vince McMahon's involvement in in Antonio Inoki's career because he initiated a talent swap initiative between the WWF and New Japan Pro Wrestling. And this would see Inoki wrestling on in Madison Square Garden for the very first time, which is weird to watch on the Madison Square Garden network, like Inoki in there. It's incredible. And it would see Bob Backlund go to New Japan and compete at the Summer Fight Series in 1978. And this is where there is this amazing little bit of history that starts from this point. We had a 1 hour time limit draw between Backlund and Inoki at this point. And it led to a rematch, which actually saw as a result of interference from Tiger Jeet Singh, it saw Antonio Inoki beat Bob Backlund to become the WWF champion. And this is one of these things that's talked about in wrestling now.
I just whipped out Wikipedia and he's not on the list, so you're a liar.
No, what?
You're a liar, Tom.
No,
he's not on the list.
He was. It was in November 30th, 1979. He beat him there. 30 minutes and an attempted run-in from Jeet Singh. Saw Inoki getting a back suplex and beat him and everything. They would have a rematch again in Japan 6 days later. Bob Backlund was like, no, there was cheating. I want a rematch.
Yeah.
Same thing happened again. Tiger Jeet Singh gets involved.
What's he bloody like?
What is he like? But this time, Backlund was able to push through the distraction and pick up a win over Inoki. But WWF president at that time, Hisashi Shinma, who was also in the pocket with New Japan Pro Wrestling, went, no, I'm overturning that. No, because it was a run-in. Inoki keeps the belt. Yay! And Inoki was the one that went, no. Inoki refused to accept that he was still the champion. Backlund beat him fair and square, and Backlund returned to the US with the championship. And
nothing was ever said about it again.
It was never mentioned. I think it was until Pro Wrestling Illustrated did a big showcase on it many years later. And they went, you realise the title change hands in Japan? What? Couldn't do that these days, could you?
There's a lot of shots of him with the belt, celebrating, holding it up with it around his waist and everything.
I love the idea of because one of the things that's been mentioned a few times is now that Triple H is running WWE.
Yeah.
One of the things that Triple H has the power to do is to retcon that and put Inoki as an official WWF title holder.
If you get out your nice stationery and write him a handwritten letter, I think that might be the only way it could happen.
Oh, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? But it's between while all this is happening, Vince McMahon wants to pay homage to Inoki. And it's while this back and forth is going on with Bob Backlund that he is awarded the WWF Martial Arts Championship. Yeah. I did a whole showcase on this on the Cultaholic podcast feed, which you can find, where we go into the lore and the history of the Martial Arts Championship. And it wasn't really about that really anyone knew what to do with, but it was like it was a bridge. It was the Bifrost that connected the WWF and New Japan Pro Wrestling. I think it would become a belt circulated within New Japan many years later.
Oh yeah, you can see it looking really out of place time wise, like design wise. In some footage where it just looks like it's a relic from the past, like it's time warped there somehow.
We have got wild stories of Inoki to get to, but I do want to end on one, because what's happened is when one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video as well, because when Inoki passed, we saw lots of videos get shared online of key moments from Inoki's life, and we kind of wanted to add a little bit of history and a little bit of backstory to them. And you may have seen footage of a match between Antonio Inoki and the great Antonio.
This is low-key one of my favourite matches of all time. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care. It's something you could show to anybody who's like, it's not real, and it's like, it can turn very real very quickly.
Oh, it certainly can, and it did. It's Antonio Bariciovic, I hope I pronounced that right, who was from Yugoslavia, moved to Canada when he was 20, and made a very dominating career as a strongman in Canada. He was in the Guinness Book of Records, I think, back in sort of the 60s, because he pulled a 433-ton train, 20 meters. Strong boy, the strongest the boys. When Antonio got into the wrestling malarkey, he was turning heads. He turned to heads in Japan, and he went on a tour of Japan before he had this match with Inoki. Yeah. I don't know how much you know about this.
It was
tour.
Disastrous.
It was a nightmare for him.
He had an attitude problem. It needed beating out of him, and it got beat out of him, and then he got home and it returned.
That was it, because the hope was, like, by the time 1977 rolled around, and he'd had this disastrous tour of Japan, he thought maybe a bit of humbling had occurred, and And so Enoki, looking for like a new monster to face him, went, hey, get on over here again. You're still an intimidating, imposing figure. So they set a match up. Actually, they had 2 matches, which is less forgotten, because when the great Antonio came back to Japan, he won like some 3-on-1 and 5-on-1 handicap matches. Just in case you're not sure, this guy is a strong lad. Then they had a match against Inoki, which Antonio won by DQ. So therefore, they set up for like a showdown on December the 8th, 1977. And this is the match that everyone remembers.
It's glorious.
Infamy.
Not a lot happens. Inoki starts off. Antonio's kind of selling. He's doing a bit of rocking back and forth. And then, you'll keep slapping his belly with both hands.
Punch me on the belly!
As in, like, you're not going to knock me over. I'm massive. I'm a unit. I'm strong. And then after about 3 or 4 attempts of this, Inoki's like, go down. Go down. All right, if you're not going to go down, I'm going to make you go down. And it gets very brutal. Inoki starts striking him. It ends with him just by the ropes getting his head stamped on.
Oh, my God.
And he's just pouring with blood.
It's just this massive, imposing figure who just decided, I'm better than Inoki. I'm not going to sell any of this. And like you say, and you can see when you watch the video, you can see
There's
the
this
moment.
look of disbelief on his face, like, what are you doing? Like, do you know the situation you're in right now? Do not do this.
And there was one strike, I think, that he landed, and Inoki, you can see in Inoki's eyes, like, all right, that's enough.
Yeah.
Takedown. Just kicks him, kicks the bejesus out of him. The match is stopped. Inoki wins.
It's horrible.
It's horrible.
It is beautiful in its own way. I think simply because it's like, well, it's what happens. Like, you can't get in there at that level, at that stage, at that time against somebody like Inoki, who takes this very seriously, very, very seriously, and takes just everything he does within the business very seriously. You can't get in there and start trying to just riff off him.
No way.
You can't get in there and start just no-selling. You can't start trying to change the plan and throw in strikes. Like, you're going to get beat. Doesn't matter how big you are.
And that was kind of the end of sort of the great Antonio from there. Like, it was really sad, because in researching this video, we found out like in 2002, he kind of gets named on a list of like Canada's favorite weirdos.
Yeah.
And there's video of footage of him just looking very disheveled in a bus station. And apparently he'd walk around with like a bag full of paper clippings, like newspaper clippings.
Yeah.
And he would talk to anybody that would listen about like his days as a strong man and stuff like that. It was a real fall for him. I'm not saying
horrible.
if he played with a note.
I feel bad now, Tom, for saying that I enjoyed watching him get the crap beaten out of him.
He had an issue. He was there. We needed humbling and Enoki. Like, why would you cross Enoki? What are you thinking? The thing what I love about Enoki and in researching him is the amount of things that he kind of kicked off by accident.
Yeah.
There's a thing that came up when I was looking this up, and you mentioned this about how Enoki accidentally invented a Street Fighter character.
There was talk of him bringing in I can't remember which talent it was, but he brought somebody into the company, and then that led to essentially the creation of Zangief.
Yes, so
like,
it was Red Cyclone, as he was better known. And he was a character that Enoki had just really taken to, and it took him under his wing. So much so that it led to, like, he got a lot of love, and Zangief is modelled on him. So there's Enoki just accidentally inventing Zangief from Street Fighter. He also accidentally caused a major rise in the wrestling scene in Pakistan.
Well,
kind of, sort of.
So Pakistan has its own wrestling scene. It's like an amateur wrestling scene. It's competed in like a mud ring, I believe. It's very traditional. There isn't really, or wasn't really, a major pro wrestling type, boom over there that I was reading about. But apparently, when this sport kind of got big enough in Pakistan to the point where it was almost like a national sport, we had Akram Palawan, who was the most prominent wrestler in Pakistan in the 60s, and he competed in that style of wrestling. So it was multiple championships he'd won all over South Asia, Singapore, and Malaysia. And in 1976, he was well past his prime, and his managers, the Bolu brothers, booked the biggest fight in the country's history by pitting him against Antonio Inoki. Someone who's up for any challenge. Any challenge challenge. It doesn't matter where. It doesn't matter how or why. He's there. He's just going to do it. But both parties had agreed to contest the match under a professional wrestling format. Which kind of led to a predetermined result. Before the fight, it was announced that the match would be held under special rules. Due to multiple reasons, such as Akram's lack of understanding of professional wrestling and the miscommunication between the two competitors, it very quickly turned from a work into a shoot about midway through. There was scratching and punches and kicks and even biting. And that all led to a very abrupt finish where Enoki broke his arm with a wrist lock. Now, PTV reported a protest taking place outside the National Stadium in Karachi as the local fans were enraged by the hometown hero's loss.
He refused to tap out, which is what it was.
And there's theories that maybe this was done because he was kind of at the end of his career. There was theories building in Pakistan where maybe that was the intended finish, even though everybody involved that was not the intended finish. It went wrong. But there was this sort of a theory where like he can't give up. So the only way to end that match would be to break his arm. And then he hasn't given up and he's valiantly fought, but now he can no longer fight. And so there's a bit of a conspiracy around that. You'd think that would have been the end of it, though, after all of the things that had kicked off coming out the back end of the match. But no!
Yeah.
He went back to Pakistan a few years later to face up-and-comer Zubair Jara Pehlewan at Gaddafi Stadium in Lahore. There were 3,000 fans packed in to see it. Sorry, 30,000, not 3. What am I saying? 30,000 fans packed in to see it.
That's a phenomenal amount of people to watch wrestling in Pakistan at this point.
A 25-minute competitive match then went to a time limit draw, but then Enoki forfeited the match at that point to award the win to him. Enoki's presence plus his training of his nephew, or Jara's nephew, Haroon Abid in 2014 put Pakistan's wrestling scene back on the map, and it's hopefully going to lead to, maybe a bit of a boom there, because if you've got a nation that's sort of already into one type of wrestling, maybe you can kind of tempt them across to something that's a little bit different. But at the same time, I just love that they've got their own thing going on, and that it's just very traditional, and it looks horrible. It looks like you really get hurt, like real bad. It looks like the type of stuff you'd see when it's like, George, Hackenschmidt versus God, like whatever. You're just watching all of this footage of just two blokes in a field beating each other, absolutely merciless. It kind of feels like that.
Accidentally inventing a Street Fighter character, accidentally kicking off a wrestling boom in Pakistan, accidentally starting a riot is another one of Enoki's things. He hangs out on his hat. We spin forward a little bit in our timelines of the late 80s, and it's Antonio Inoki once again looking for a monster to square up to, and he finds one when All Japan trades Leon White to New Japan, and they come up with a persona and identity.
That's former professional football player Leon White.
Apologies.
God, what else is he going to be known for? Come on,
just being a lovely man. They came up with this. They came up with the persona of Big Van Vader, and it's deeply rooted in Japanese folklore.
Yeah, people thought immediately when you see the big kind of entrance gear that he had over there and everything with the steam, you think it's quite Darth Vader-y because he's coming out. He's quite an intimidating presence with this big sort of silvery black mask on. But no, it's sort of as you said, it's linked more to tradition, isn't it?
Well, he said on the Cult of Whatever podcast, not affiliated, he said the Iron Mask was something the Japanese came up with. It's nothing to do with Darth Vader out of Star Wars. It's actually a samurai headgear and defensive wear for the shoulders and the chest. In Japanese folklore, to settle disputes, the strongest men from villages would go to an island and do battle, and Vader was given the title of Emperor's Warrior. Antonio Inoki, after watching me wrestle, came up to me and gave me the Iron Mask and made him sort of Emperor's Warrior, and was introduced as the crown jewel of Takeshi's Puroresu Gundam affiliate group, managed by Takeshi Kitano.
Yes.
Get these wrong, please tell me. And we got Vader Inoki from there.
But there's an interesting little tidbit there, because Takeshi Kitano isn't just anybody. He is a big deal in Japan.
And that's a big deal for Leon White.
Yeah, so he's a famous Japanese comedian turned actor, director, video game developer, author, lots of things. He's done a lot of stuff. He's someone that millions of people will know. Even if you'd never heard of him, you've probably seen him at some point. But as a comedian, he was a member of the Manzai duo 2 Beat, and Manzai is basically, can you imagine like an old couple bickering about something nonsensical? That kind of speed and pace of snappiness and bouncing off each other, it's that kind of humor. It's very quick, it's very articulate. They were known for being a bit more risque, so he was very popular because of that, and he was known for being a bit edgy, so it made sense he'd be leading a stable that was going to try and bring down New Japan. But as a TV host, this is where people might know him best from. He was Takeshi in Takeshi's Castle. Yeah.
He's that Takeshi.
Yeah, I believe he came up with the show concept as well.
Wow.
I think he wanted a real life Super Mario Brothers, which he achieves 100%.
Nice.
But yeah, he's Count Takeshi.
Well, there you go. That's blown my mind. That's something new I've learned today. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
So the real Takeshi's Castle, from there to the White Castle of Doom that is Big Van Vader. That's a weird crossover of a reference. We'll take it. So Vader and Enoki goes down December 27th. Sumo Hall in Tokyo is sold out. In the run-up to this, Vader challenging Enoki, who'd already defeated Riki Chosu. And this was short and aggressive and not what you think, because Enoki just got battered by Big Van Vader.
Yeah, but you kind of need to establish Vader as a monstrous force.
Absolutely.
And that would follow him round for years, wouldn't it? Like...
It was just a mauling by Vader, and within just a couple of minutes, Big Van Vader pinned Antonio Inoki, his first loss in, I think, 2 years. Only a second loss in 10.
Yeah, but it didn't end there. So after the match, they decided to further the onslaught a little bit to add insult to injury and really whip the fans up into a fervor, because they all really, really like Inoki. So fans just watched on as Vader continued to beat on Inoki in the corner after the bell, and they were really angry, like white heat level. He claims in his book that there was a briefing with Inoki backstage before the match, and he had specific instructions on how Inoki wanted the bout to transpire. He said, "This is what I want. I want you to just rush in after the match, punch me in the face just as hard as you can. Now, I don't want you to knock me out, but I want you to break my nose and cut my lip. Whatever you need to do. You're a monster." He then went on to say, "We knew the audience was not going to like it, but we had no idea to what extent of dislike we would get. Usually Japanese fans are very reserved, but not on this night. I ended Inoki's streak in the most horrible way they could imagine, and this action led to the Inoki fans to riot. They wanted blood, my blood."
And it shows the power of Inoki there. And it goes, and when Inoki, with Inoki, he was always one for creating new stars as and where he could, to the point where, like, him merely striking you was a way of establishing you. And this brings us to another crazy story about Inoki, which is the fact that his strikes imbued you with the power of Inoki.
Yes, if he is to hit you, he will fill you with his fighting spirit. Now, this happened to almost every newcomer in New Japan, and he would just slap him. You slap somebody, and it gives you his fighting spirit. It's something that I guess kind of spur you on. It's something that's going to fill you full of power.
Going to wake you up.
And it's going to make you feel like Inoki feels, I guess. But a lot of stars from around the world got slapped by Inoki. And there's one clip in particular that does the rounds that shows this tradition in action. It's New Year's Eve 2000. The IGF, the Inoki Genome Federation, presented Inoki bom-ba-ye at the Osaka Dome. Halfway through the show, after Naoya Ogawa beat Tadao Yasuda in under 2 minutes via TKO, a special ceremony then took place. Now, they held a transferring of the fighting spirit ceremony, I guess. Antonio Inoki just stood there in the ring, and everybody involved with the show, guests, stars, actors, refs, everybody kind of involved in and around it, queued up, one by one got in the ring, and he proceeded to just slap them as hard as he could. As hard as he could.
Clattered a man, woman, child. You all got clattered by no children, I don't think, but certainly men and women. Got a clattering by
I'd heard somewhere, I don't know how true it is, but I'd heard somewhere that if you saw him in the street, and you were polite enough and it was a good day and the stars had aligned and you asked, he might slap you as well.
Oh,
so
what an honor that would be coming out of WH Smith.
Yeah, but it's an honor that one person refused entirely. Now, I get it, because it's like, you want to slap me in the face? No. But at the same time, I'd get slapped in the face by Antonio Inoki.
I wouldn't blink.
Yeah, it's Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar refused to have anything to do with it. So
when he got wind of like this initiation of getting the fighting spirit of Inoki, he just said, right, before we do anything else, I don't want any of that. I ain't getting slapped by anyone.
It also sort of links to a story that Chris Jericho put into one of his books, in which he's backstage. Inoki's there in the locker room. He goes up to this young boy, which is like a new star, a trainee star, I guess, on the rise in New Japan. And he just stares him out. He just stares into his eyes, and all of the boys kind of stand around watching. And this young boy gets hypnotized by Inoki, and then Inoki proceeds to slap him as hard as he can. Now, Jericho's apparently stood there the entire time, confused by the whole thing, until somebody leans over and is like, it's all a work. So he had the power not only to kind of get the public to go along with his works, but I don't know if it's out of fear. I don't know if it's out of respect. But people would apparently just go along with this whole hypnotizing routine, even though they're in the business too.
I think by this point, Inoki had such respect that, like, I'm not going to challenge that.
Yeah.
If that's what's happening,
look,
that's fine with me.
If you're paying my check, and it's just one slap every now and then, I suppose. But I mean, I would be a pro wrestler, so it's not like it desks you. It's like, go on, Adam, you can slap me as hard as you want.
Obviously, we've talked a lot about the wrestling career of Antonio Inoki, and there are a few more notes that we are yet to play. But of course, a big part of Antonio Inoki's life, of course, was his political career. Back in 1989, he launched the Sports and Peace Party. Now, the ideology, according to Wikipedia, to incorporate the spirit and sports into politics, realizing peace by maintaining the health body of all citizens. And there is incredible footage.
All about fighting spirit, man. It's all about fighting spirit.
It's his modus operandi.
But it's like his life message, I guess, is, you can take that fighting spirit and that anger within you, and you can turn it into something useful. And you can turn it into something that's going to benefit. And you can take all the best qualities of things and then apply fighting spirit to it and make it even better. So it's a very big message that you'll see a lot through anything that he's sort of involved in.
I love Inoki on the campaign trail. There's video footage you can find online of this, putting on, going jogging through Tokyo, putting on wrestling exhibitions in the middle of the city. There's a great video of him enziguring a mannequin's head off, and the head landing in the crowd to much fanfare.
Yeah.
Like he had the charisma and the energy to really make a difference. And there's so many incidences throughout his career where he uses that political nous to really make a difference. I want to mention Collision in Korea. I think we have to mention Collision in Korea, because biggest wrestling show of all time. I know we're jumping around the timeline a bit, but biggest wrestling show of all time. And it was done as Inoki was attempting to be a goodwill ambassador towards North Korea almost.
Yeah, Japan and Korea has a very complex, a very difficult history, and there's still to this day some stigma that goes with being a Korean citizen living in Japan. So it's sort of something you'll see the Japanese government. They did it fairly recently, I believe, by trying to make a set of like half Japanese, half Korean like pop acts and stuff, and groups and stuff like that. So I think it's something that the government's always really tried to bring the two countries together. And Inoki thought that he had a plan to do this with especially the North side, who, Japan constantly at odds with, by going over there, by sort of reaching out to them and weird.
He's back.
But it's sort of it's a weird one.
It was a weird one, but it's Inoki making those inroads with North Korea, doing the thing that he does the best, which is putting on a massive wrestling show. Yeah. He went to WCW and said, we would love some of your help with this and some of your talent with this. And Bischoff was like, yeah, we're up for this, up for getting involved in this. Inoki was set to main event the show. It was going to be Inoki versus Hulk Hogan. That was the initial plan. Massive main event for Collision in Korea. Hogan went, no chance, and stepped away from that one. What was it Eric Bischoff said in the interview?
What's Hogan going to do coming out in North Korea? He can't be there with the flag. He can't be doing any of that.
I am a real man.
Well, even his WCW theme, like, it's America, man. Like, it's all America.
And it's weird because we do the Cultaholic Classic Nitro review on a Wednesday on the podcast feed, and on a Thursday on the podcast feed rather. And we should know which day we put the podcast out. And Hogan at this point is so against the idea of turning heel. It frightens him because he's like, I'm making all this money, and that would be somewhere where he would ostensibly be a heel. But anyway, Eric Bischoff on his podcast has said, I might as well have asked him to row a boat to Pluto. This led to Bischoff versus Ric Flair. That led to the main event. Sonny Ono, the WCW
Bischoff versus
consultant.
Ric Flair.
Oh, no, sorry, Bischoff. No, I mean, that'd have been a main event.
I don't remember that at all.
Ric Flair versus Antonio Inoki. It was almost Bischoff versus the whole of North Korea, as we discover watching Dark Side of the Ring, and you get all the stories from that of some of the wrestlers, like Hawk and Scott Norton falling out in lumps during the show. Hawk and Two Cold Scorpio falling out in lumps. We hear of Scott Norton allegedly getting his phone bugged while there and his room turned upside down. Eric Bischoff, who goes for a jog in the morning, to the horror of people in North Korea, as he describes
Everybody having to hand over their passports on entry to the country. You know, it's a very restrictive nation, as everybody knows. But it's just terrifying to hear the accounts firsthand, especially at that time in North Korea, having, you know, I believe this was just around the time of the famine or just before the famine. And it was a very strange political atmosphere even then for that country, because we'd lost Kim Il-sung over there. Well, I say they'd lost Kim Il-sung and moved into Kim Jong-il as the leader.
And so it was all that was going on whilst they were putting on this wrestling show. It's a funny one, is Collision in Korea, to watch, like removing yourself from the political side of it. It still remains as one of the highest attended wrestling shows
I think
of all time.
They held it at is it Rungrado Mayday Stadium, I believe. I can't remember the full name, but it's got like a massive long name. But that's where they hold the Arirang Games, which is, if you've ever seen the big sort of not the parades, like the military parades where you see all of the, you know, stuff getting wheeled out. It's where you see like all of the massive interpretive dance, and there's like hundreds and hundreds of people running around. It's purposefully built to be this colossal, almost intimidatingly large venue, because it was sort of in a bit of a bid to get in on the Olympics, and then eventually to stick it to the Olympics for excluding North Korea when it came to South Korea.
And it's as you say, it's an incredible venue.
Yeah.
But if you watch the show, it looks like it's in like the Gund Arena in Cleveland. Like it's like it's weirdly shot.
Yeah, it's very strangely shot. But at the same time, just the mass of humanity that's in there is unbelievable. I mean, they're not quite prepped for it, but there's just a lot of people.
Antonio Inoki would have multiple conversations with some of the more controversial leaders and dictators around the world. One of those was Fidel Castro.
Yes.
And this led to possibly one of the strangest purchases a wrestler has ever made.
Yeah, I mean, we ran down Ricky Dozan's purchases earlier, but they all kind of made sense, right?
Yeah.
In that economy that was potentially going to start booming, getting all of that stuff off the ground, a nice holiday resort, making absolute bank. However, Enoki, he'd heard a rumor, right, that this island that Fidel Castro was selling had some treasure on it. And so he bought the island, and he would often get people to try and come with him to go dig for treasure. It's quite simply that's it. He then renamed it to the Enoki Friendship Island, I believe.
Yeah.
But it's just it's very like playfully childish, that like, oh, there's treasure. Like, I love it. It sort of indicates like who he is as a person, I feel, really well.
There's a friendship island, and there's a chance for some shenanigans with some treasure buried in it.
If somebody was just like, hey, I've bought an island, do you want to go be the Goonies for a weekend? Like, yeah, of course.
But it depends how often he was doing it. Because obviously this is from the Ring of Hell book, where
He's just rocking up outside everybody's house in a helicopter. Come on, you're under contract.
Oh, hang on, Enoki's ringing me. Hello, mate. What's happening this week? What do you mean? I might be free. What do you mean?
I'm ill. I can't come.
No, I don't have a shovel. So let's go dig the treasure. Enoki and North Korea, Enoki and Fidel Castro, Enoki and Saddam Hussein.
Now this one is you can't really describe it. It's unbelievable.
We will try. So it happened the same year that the Sports and Peace Party was set up. It was the same year that the Sports and Peace Party was set up. Inoki was elected into the House of Councillors in Japan, which gave him more political stroke, and it was happening at the time of the Gulf War breaking out. Saddam Hussein leading an Iraqi invasion on Kuwait. Now, reports said that Iraq had captured 141 Japanese citizens and were holding them hostage. And they were holding them, as they say, as human shields. By that, they mean that they were holding them captive in sort of key locations around Iraq to stop the coalition
from attacking those areas.
Yeah. So Enoki, who was upset with the amount of non-movement of the coalition.
Which, by the way, he apparently took his plan to them a couple of times, and they were like, absolutely not, you madman. You're not doing that. You're not doing it. Sit down. Somebody watch his door. Do not let him out of the building.
He did it. Antonio Inoki went on an unofficial, unsanctioned mission to Iraq to negotiate release of the hostages.
He just rocked up to Iraq.
Bought a plane ticket to Baghdad.
Yeah, just swanned up to Saddam's house probably and was like, yo, want to chat?
Well, he took a meeting. You're not a million miles off. He took a meeting with Uday, who was Saddam's son. Turned up with a kimono for Saddam's daughter-in-law and for the grandchildren. I'm not even lying. They
were cool at the time.
I know, but who goes?
Do you not remember the 90s? They were everywhere. And they were way ahead of us. So when they were popular here, they'd been long popular over there.
He bought Saddam Hussein's grandchildren those electronic dancing flowers.
Yeah, you clap and it dances and it's got sunglasses on.
Just Enoki holding them as he walks into Uday Hussein's front room.
I like the idea that he'd maybe have a procession carrying the gifts one by one, and there's just all these dancing flowers with all the footsteps.
But that was, you know what? It led to several trips back and forth with gifts and good tidings and trying to sort of ease tensions. Coalition were livid. Margaret Thatcher had some strong things to say about what was going on.
I'm sure she did. But she had her own strong things to say about what was happening in our country at the same time. And now a tribute act's doing the same thing. It's great, isn't it?
Yay!
Yeah.
The coalition on the whole felt that the way that this was being dealt with by Enoki and the Japanese president wasn't appropriate to the way to deal with this particular issue. However, that opinion changed when Saddam Hussein, having these meetings back and forth with Enoki, went, okay, we'll release most of the Japanese hostages. And it's like, oh, maybe diplomacy somewhat works in this situation where we didn't think it would. Anyway, Enoki was like, nah, I ain't enough. I want all of them. There were still 41 hostages that they held on to. And Enoki went back and had another grand plan. It was here that he set up the World Peace Festival from Iraq. He took over to Iraq Japanese musicians and rock stars, celebrities, sports athletes, wrestlers, and put on a show for the world to see. Once again, imbuing those values of the Sports and Peace Party to say, look, we want to come together. And the families, he brought over with him the families of those that were still being held hostage. And sat them around the front row, and you could see their emotional faces as the show goes on. Anyway, this whole event goes on. The whole eyes of the world are on this, and there's no movement from Saddam Hussein's side. They get to the Saddam Hussein airport, and they are about to board their flight, having to go home with nothing. And Enoki is stopped by a consort and says, please stay a few more days because we'd like to talk further. And there's amazing footage of Enoki just embracing this guy with tears in his eyes. You very rarely see Enoki that emotional because he realized what a breakthrough this was. And it was just a few days later that Saddam Hussein said, we will free your final 41 hostages. And it was just a short while after that they agreed to release all the international hostages. All the foreigners that were being held hostage by Iraq, by Iraq at that point, were released shortly after this.
And how did he get it done? Not by listening to rules, not by anything else.
Dancing electronic flowers.
Not even that, by sheer fighting spirit.
Fighting spirit.
That's it.
Fighting spirit. It's absolutely incredible to say, And since then, he's continued to make in his lifetime, he continued to make independent trips to places like Pakistan, like North Korea. Which during the height of the Taliban, he was trying to get talks with them.
Oh, yeah.
And it was, and this led to just like, even if the result wasn't what it needed, it was worldwide respect for Inoki, who ended up on the stamps in North Korea, I believe.
He ended up on stamps in North Korea. The thing was, as these trips to North Korea continued, there was sort of less political movement that came out of them, and they went on for quite some time, and then sort of public opinion began to change on them and found them to be a bit unsavory in the modern age for those trips to be continuing. But that doesn't take away from the fact that, you know, these trips have yielded, especially in the case of Iraq, incredibly positive things.
Let's end on two more stories based on videos that you might have seen or pictures you might have seen since the passing of Inoki. You may have seen Inoki losing his mind ringside whilst Doc Gallows and Sylvester Terkay have a fight. This is ace.
This takes place in the IGF, which was, I believe, so the thing with Inoki was he believed so strongly in the idea of MMA that he eventually got New Japan to a position where you had wrestlers taking on actual MMA fighters in MMA contests. Now, quite a lot of the wrestlers had experience in other forms of martial arts, but I'd argue not to the level of some of the competitors they were facing. And then this led to some stars getting hurt. It led to stars looking like fools. It ruined a lot of people's kind of strength and how they were perceived by the audience. But IGF would go on regardless. It was a mission. He was going to blend everything together. It was going to be a type of show where you could turn up and see a kickboxing bout, a wrestling match, a shuto match, boxer versus karate, karate technician or whatever. Karate technician. What do you call? I'll just say a boxer versus a judoka. There you go. But it was this idea to bring all of these things into under one umbrella, and it while you kind of got to, G it up a bit and be like, go on, try and do it. It ultimately, it's just such a far-reaching thing that when you turn up for it, it's sort of like, all right, what's next? Kickboxing. All right, how does kickboxing? Okay, I can't just sit and watch 5 different disciplines.
This is kind of where the term Enokiism was born, wasn't it? This idea of these crossing of the streams that may not necessarily work as well as hoped, but you kind of got to love.
Enokiism starts off up here and it kind of goes over time. But this was a match that took place at IGF Genome 14, which was February the 5th, 2011. It's Keith Hansen versus The Predator, aka Doc Gallows versus Sylvester Terkay. The match isn't memorable at all. There's nothing special happens between them. There's no big moment. There's no crazy, massive spot. There's nothing that happens wrestling-wise that makes this so iconic. It's the fact that Inoki got really angry about the match.
He did not like it.
So Gallows was on the Total Effin' Marks podcast, and he talked about it, and he said, I think I had a match like that with Sylvester Terkay in about 2011 in Japan for Antonio Inoki. So I'm not encouraging for people to go look it up. We are. But like my first showing over there, I was like, I did great. I'm going to be the man over there. And then the next time I came, Sylvester had been out of the ring for about 6 months and not doing any training and getting very tired. And he's a great dude, but it was not our best showing. And then you just start hearing shouts. So when you watch the video, you kind of sit rest hold into the corner, throwing some strikes, couple of holds, and then do throws. And it's just kind of basic fare. And then you just hear this shouting from the back of the room. Just really angry shouting. And then the camera cuts over, really panicked, and it's Antonio Inoki. He's livid, and he's got a hard-set chair in his hand.
He's just banging it against the barricade.
And he said Antonio Inoki runs down through the crowd, and he's screaming at us at ringside. Pretty effing amazing, especially when you're a lifelong Japanese wrestling fan. And this is like my second time in Japan. It was pretty traumatizing at the time.
If you watch the match, they go home pretty quickly when they realise that Inoki is there, screaming about how much he's not enjoying this match. Inoki was he had his own passion for wrestling that was undeniable, and it's just one of those moments that unfortunately was captured on celluloid of Inoki going, "This is rubbish. This is rubbish. Stop it now."
But then again, it's awful. You'd be so mortified, I imagine, in the situation, because it's like, oh God, like this is. Like, you must have been, as he said, traumatizing. You must have been like everything running through your head at once, like what's going to happen. But at the same time, it's kind of like quality control, I guess. It sucks that he doesn't think you're good or the match wasn't that good or whatever. But at the same time, he's publicly kind of going, I don't like it either, to anybody that didn't like the match. So maybe I don't know. It's impossible to understand the man.
It's one of them where, and I hope you appreciate, like, if Tony Khan did that on Dynamite on Wednesday, we'd obviously chastise him for it, but it's Inoki.
I'd have a giggle if Tony Khan did it.
I mean, I'd have a giggle, but it's Inoki. It is what it is. We will end with an entrance, and there is no one that makes a grander entrance like Antonio Inoki. There was a Pride show where he dropped in via parachute.
Was it Pride? I thought it was Jungle Fight.
No, that's Jungle Fight had a very different entrance. It was a Pride FC show, which featured him coming in on a parachute, which was just phenomenal. But
I've not seen that.
No.
Oh my God.
Yeah, parachuting Inoki.
Oh.
If he thought he was more dangerous, parachuting Inoki. When obviously when he retired, as Sam said, like his love for the mixed martial arts world and the mixed bag that is Inokiism saw him getting into MMA style endeavors, and this led to the birth of Jungle Fight, an MMA house alongside Brazilian MMA star Walid Ismail. And now, ever the humanitarian, Inoki wanted a fighting company where all the fighters insisted on planting a tree to fix the deforestation in the Amazon.
Which... it's a positive message everybody should get behind.
It's a positive message.
I think that, some trees over some additional McDonald's burgers would be great.
I think that's a nice idea. Yeah. We can all take that away with us. There's one particular moment in the history of Jungle Fight that Inoki is especially remembered for. Ever the man to make an entrance. Antonio Inoki had this idea. What if I were to swim to the event?
See, I'd not even seen this, and I think it was Alan Cheapshot on Twitter posted it, and I was blown away by it. Just the fact that there were two shots of it, I was like, what? But essentially, Inoki is arriving. He wanted to make a spectacle as he arrived, and he wanted to arrive by boat. So he's going on up the Amazon River in a little boat, and he decided that the best way to maybe make his way across would be to swim across in full view of everybody else. Now, he just leaps into the water in his trunks, and he just starts going for it, and everybody's starting to shout, and he's like, yeah, and he's swimming along.
I'm here.
Like, wave it, yeah. And apparently they were shouting at him that the water was full of crocodiles and piranhas. He made it across without one of them even trying anything, probably because they took one look at him and went, it's Antonio Inoki, and turned the other way. And he emerged on the other side absolutely fine. It blows my mind. But yeah, I'd never heard of that, and then I saw that post. So yeah, thank you to Alan Cheapshot for posting that.
I'd be terrified. Those poor crocodiles had no idea they were swimming with an Inoki. It's awful. His humanitarian...
Get out of the water.
Get out of there immediately. I said that was the last one. There's one I nearly forgot. His humanitarian efforts won't be forgotten as well. He was one that was very much empowered community and spirit and coming together of people. He opened temporary soup kitchens and fed thousands of homeless people and unemployed people across Tokyo during sort of the last 10 years or so of his life. And he needed something to raise awareness to this. And this was something that was introduced to me only this morning.
And it was me on the day of his passing as well. I had no idea. I think it was that same thread, but yeah.
In order to raise awareness of the homeless plight, particularly in Tokyo, Antonio Inoki would go out dressed as if he was homeless, so like dressed in sort of worn down clothes and scruffy clothes, bringing attention to the plight of the homeless. Because even when dressed very much down and bedraggled, Inoki stands out. And it raises some questions.
But it raised awareness. It allowed soup kitchens to operate more freely throughout the city, and I think that he would fund soup kitchens, and he'd continue this endeavor throughout his life. When I was looking through just for any more on the story, there were things dated like 2013, 2007. Like, so it's happened a lot, and it's clearly something that's close to his heart.
And it would lead to, and again, something I did not know existed until this morning, a homeless Antonio Inoki action figure. Where you can play with your favorite wrestler in homeless attire.
I love all of those old New Japan figures, but even then it is a bit bewildering because he's just in like a long overcoat, and I think he's got like a walking stick or something, and it's just Enoki. It's weird that it was a figure, but I guess it's another thing that would raise awareness, and I'd imagine maybe even proceeds might have gone toward helping his scheme, but.
It seems like something as wild as that seems like a fitting place to wrap up today. We've just given you a taste of some of the wild times and stories from the life of Antonio Inoki. There won't be another, will there?
No, I don't think people say this a lot about the World War II generation, but just built different. He just seemed to be so driven by his passion for pro wrestling and living up to, the shadow of his mentor. And Baba was the same. It's just a very unique set of circumstances that led to the creation of Antonio Inoki. And I think, we may have stars that are of comparable size and skill, but there'll never be another person like him. And especially not a jawline like his. Come on. Come on.
Here's with some of your favourite Antonio Inoki memories, matches, stories in the comments down there. Stay safe and love you. Bye.